actually, in fact, show you the gateway drug that got me into it. This is it. So yeah, I spent probably, gosh, I don't know, 15 years, 14 years as a print reporter, covering politics mainly in New Jersey, Delaware, before going to the Times through various other organizations in DC. And I started there as part of the computer system reporting team. Who here doesn't know what computer system reporting or data-driven journalism is? Okay, all right, not, okay, who's lying? All right, we're gonna get you later. Well, computer system reporting is pretty straightforward. You're a journalist. You have sources. Some of those sources are people. Often, data can be a source, right? You look for sources where you find them. It could be a document. It could be a human source. But why not use data? Data is ubiquitous, right? So many government agencies these days are taking public records and turning them into databases. So that's really what it's all about. Computer system reporting is just a silly word for, actually in my opinion, for doing your job. How can you possibly, this is what always amazed me, is how can you possibly be a reporter covering a local school district or anything where there's financials and not know how to take that budget that they put out and just check it. Just check it. Do the numbers add up? One of the most embarrassing stories I ever missed was because I didn't do that. And I wrote a story saying, oh my God, Bridgewater, New Jersey school district taxes are going up 7% year over year. And this is a hard lesson based on the numbers that they gave me. Next day, press release comes over. Great news. Taxes only going up 3.5%. Why? Because the city administrator had screwed up something in the spreadsheet. The 7% was actually over 2 years instead of 1 year. Now, had I just plunked those numbers into a spreadsheet, I would have realized that, right? Simple, simple stuff. But to me, that's what journalism's about. It's trying to say, wait a minute, this is what you're saying, but is that really true? So that's kind of what computer-assisted reporting is all about. I got to the New York Times, 2005. I'm on the politics team. We're doing mostly money and politics kind of stuff, campaign finance, lobbying, whatever it is, around that campaign. And we had a really, really solid team. I mean, an amazing team of reporters. And we were generating all this incredible data. But guess what? We had nowhere to put it. Sure, we could feed reporters little tidbits here and there. Sure, we could find little interesting stories, things like that. We were contributing to stories all the time. But we had stuff that, really the public ought to be seeing. And we had no capability to actually get it to the public, get it out to the web. And that's where this kind of comes in. Now, you'll notice this has absolutely nothing at all to do with politics. But a guy came to me, new hire, his name is Gabe Dance. And he was in the multimedia, he was the first hire in what we ended up calling the multimedia team. There's actually 3 teams at the New York Times that do interactives. Mine is one of them. The other one is multimedia, the other one is graphics. And he was the first hire there, and he did some of this kind of like flash data busy kind of stuff. And so we were chatting, and I said to him, I've got this data set here that I've always wanted to do something interesting with, and I never have been able to do anything of any note with it. And that's, if you ever go on to if you're a football fan, you go and look at NFL box scores online, they have the play-by-play. You can see Brett Favre hands off to Adrian Peterson for 5 yards up the middle, whatever. And it'll just be this play-by-play, right? Well, the language that they use in that play-by-play is really consistent. So I was able to write a little script that went through and actually parsed that out, took it apart, and said, well, how many times did they run this way? How many times did they run that way? How many times did they run that way? How many times did they throw deep, right? And you could do some kind of rudimentary analysis on that, just to sort of look at trends and tactics and things like that. We looked at it for a little while, but the thing we ended up looking at was penalties. And penalties were going through the roof when we looked at year over year after year after year. And so this is actually what we ended up doing, this little database. Here it is. This is so adorable. You can compare 2 teams, okay? Now note, here, nothing's clickable. You can click on nothing here, okay? You can look at individual players. This is so cute. right? You can compare two players and see what they got penalized for. See, we did these little charts down here.
Is this Flash-based?
This is all Flash-based. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Can you tell? Right? And then, but here's the really interesting thing. Here's the thing that we really wanted to do more with. And if we could do this over again, this is what I would have done. This is actually comparing refereeing crews, right? To see who is more likely to throw what kind of penalty. Now that would have been a really interesting analysis to do, right? But we didn't really end up doing that very much. This is what we got. But I'll tell you, this one project, this silly little project, ended up pretty much changing my life. As far as, I mean, that sounds very melodramatic, but it kind of did. Because until that point, I was going to be pretty much what I was doing, a print reporter. Here, I had the ability to kind of think through, like, I have this amazing data set. I have this idea that there's a story there. And I don't need to go through a reporter. I don't need to go through an editor. I can do something like that, to take that data, turn it into some sort of a non-traditional narrative online, and I can just create this stuff. I don't have to do that through anyone else. Now, this was a nightmare, by the way. This involved generating thousands of individual data files. But what this did do is it got the editors of the paper to realize, wow, there is something here. So that's great. So this is the project. This was kind of the gateway that got us to some of the other projects we do. Here's a project we launched, well, years ago, but we redid. This is a project we did with the graphics desk, where we wanted to show over time how Guantanamo, how the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, both how many detainees there were across time since it opened, and where they went and what happened to them. So let me play this and you'll get a sense. Okay, so over here you can see these are from NATO countries. Now, watch as it comes in, you'll see darker black showing up, and those are high-value detainees, or the darkest ones are ones who died in custody. There's a couple who died in custody. And you can hover over and see who these people are. And you can dig in and you can click through and see more about these guys too. And that's what this whole thing is about. But it kind of tells you a story, right? It shows the ebb and flow over time of how people of Guantanamo, the story of Guantanamo. We build websites. We built this website called Schoolbook. This is kind of I describe it as sort of a boutique, right? The problem with the Times is there's so much stuff. And so the stuff that we actually do cover but people don't think we cover, like local education in New York City, gets missed, gets lost in the noise. So we tried a little experiment. And we got a small group of people together, reporters, editors, and my team. And we said, okay, let's start with a blank slate. Say, what would we build if we wanted to build a website that just covered New York City education? What do parents want? How do they want it? And this is what resulted. And then, of course, since you can't get away from it, even if you're me and you desperately want to, that's actually a lie, I love politics, you'll see our work throughout the politics coverage. If you saw the other night on Super Tuesday, the dashboard, all that stuff, these are things that my team contributed to, along with graphics and multimedia. So that's kind of what I do now. But that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about social media. Because I do do a lot of techie things, and I do a lot of building of things. But as of the beginning of this year, my team also took over the social media and community teams. They joined Interactive News, which is the name of my team. So it's about 25 people. And we have two really, really, really smart social media editors, a desk of comment moderators, and then my team of technologists, programmer journalists. And what's interesting, what has been really eye-opening about this is how social has changed not just our approach to building things, but kind of how we view telling stories on the web. It has completely opened my eyes. And I find this endlessly interesting. And I certainly hope you do too, because that's what I'm going to talk about, like it or not, for the next 45 minutes or so. So just buckle up. Okay, so as we know, social media is just blowing up. It's just exploding, right? More do you love that I love that transition. I have been working I have been desperately trying to work that transition into a keynote slideshow for so long, and I finally found a way to do it. The numbers are just up and up and up and up. At the New York Times right now, social media as a class of referrers, you know what I mean by referrers? Of how you get to the New York Times, right? There's search, there's direct traffic, people coming right to www.nytimes.com. And then there's links that people find that bring you to New York Times. Social media used to account for something like 2%, as recently as like 3 years ago. It is now over 5.5%. And this is the trend line. Search is pretty much like that. It was like this, now it's pretty much like that. Social media is like this, okay? Facebook is the third largest generator of traffic to the New York Times. Now, I will tell you, it is nowhere near as much traffic as we get from direct traffic. People come directly to our site. That is the vast majority of our traffic. But among those who come to us from some other place, social media is a big and growing part. So, it's blowing up. But actually, what I'm going to talk about tonight is not about that. I'm going to talk about spinach. I'm going to get back to this in a minute. You'll see why I'm talking about spinach. But let's start right here. Okay, let's start with something that we built a couple of years ago. This is 2009. Before we started really focusing hard on social. We built this, which was our Oscar ad. Now, Oscars at the New York Times, obviously a very big deal. It's kind of a signature project for us, right? It's very, very, very important. People turned to us for this kind of stuff. We have among the most influential, he's videotaping this, we have the most influential critics in the industry. So what we decided to build was kind of, think about this as like an Oscar party in a box, right? We wanted to build it so that you come here, you can fill out a ballot, you can save your ballot, you can share your ballot with a friend by creating this group, right? You can create a group and call it Aron's Oscar Party. You can send it by email to a bunch of friends, say, hey, fill out the ballot, join my group. That's an example of a group right there. And then on Oscar night, we'll score your group. There's even like a little iPhone version of it over there, so you didn't have to sit in front of your laptop or your computer, and we'll tell you who won. Pretty cool. So this did pretty well. We ended up getting a couple million page views, about 30,000 ballots. Worked great. Nothing wrong with this at all. Except it is the very opposite of social. Come the social media team. And the social media editors, who are amazing, Liz Heron and Lexi Mainland, who are two social media editors, took a look at that and said, oh no, we are missing an enormous opportunity here. And they made the case quite convincingly. This is actually Liz and Andre Schenkman, who's one of my guys who saw the religion almost immediately. And said, you know, why are we trying to replicate something that already exists on the New York Times? Why are we trying to create Facebook when Facebook already exists? Because it's not universal, obviously, right? Not everybody has a Facebook account, but for those people who do, and who are users of Facebook, Facebook is where their community is, right? The people you are almost certain to invite to your pool probably are already in your Facebook friend group. So we made a bold, at the time I said, and I'm going to admit this because I was totally wrong, but I have to keep admitting this, just for full disclosure, I thought foolish decision to ditch the groups completely, ditch the email thing, and just say, you know what? Facebook is our community. Facebook is your group, right? When you fill out a ballot now, and you save your ballot and you share it to Facebook, all of your friends who also filled out ballots, by default, end up in your group. That's who you're competing with on Oscar night. That was last year's version. This year's version, we brought back kind of a notion of groups, a little bit, where we prompted you, we said, hey, challenge your Facebook friends, create your own kind of private group. So, how did we do? Well, before I get to that, let me show you the little features of this. So, we did the obvious stuff, right? Share on Facebook, share on Twitter. But here's the big difference. Bang. Suddenly now, all of your friends are part of your Oscar night experience. When you save a ballot, it wasn't just saving it and then sharing the ballot. Suddenly you're sharing your pick on the ballot. That is a key difference. You're sharing your contribution to something, not just the existence of something, which is the difference between layering social media on top and being fundamentally of social media, right? Because that's what it's all about. Nobody cares that there is an Oscar ballot. People care that Aron thought, again, foolishly, that Social Network was going to win Best Picture, okay? We did this I mentioned earlier for those of you who were there, we did some basic analysis using Facebook data too. This was really cool. We were able to say, okay, if you pick the King's Speech based on your likes and the various demographics that we know about you in Facebook, okay, this was cool and also kind of creepy, I'll admit. But because of that we know this, here are the other 4 films that are the top kind of liked films among those who picked that, right? You could do some kind of cool stuff. And then on Oscar night, we had this dashboard, right? We had super fast photos. We were showing you the red carpet before TV. We had on the left there, here's the super fast photos. We did video. We did live video. Last year it worked great. This year, we had some problems. But we had A.O. Scott, the premier critic in the world, and David Carr, the media critic, columnist, doing kind of live spots in between commercials. And then, here's your ballot. These are your friends. If you could see, you can't actually see it here, but below the notables were all your friends in your network who also filled out a ballot, okay? And then when I give this presentation to the business side, I like to point out the big fat Armani ad right there. That's the sound of money being made. That's what I like. Everybody likes it. So here's the news feed, right? This is kind of the dashboard experience. So we wanted this to be what has now become the cliche of the industry, the second screen, where you're sitting on the couch with your iPad or your laptop or whatever, watching the Oscars, and here comes the stream of additional stuff. Okay, so how did it do year over year? Okay, 2010, we got 26,469 ballots. 2011, 58,415. Right? That's a win. Every conceivable web metric related to social, up, 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 up. All right? But here's the one that really opened my eyes. This is the one, this to me is the money slide. The Oscars is a 5-week rollout. Week 1 is the nominations. Week 5 is the lead up to the actual event. There's 3 weeks in between when our beloved application is going to get no homepage love at all. It is going to be a cul-de-sac, right? It's going to have some promo off in some part of the movies page, and that's where it is going to sit. And this is the difference between being of social and not. So the bottom line is 2009. The top line is 2010. This is the number of ballots we received by week for those 3 weeks when the apps were not on the homepage. Okay, so you can see there's a fairly substantial difference there, right? So that's why I call this now our second homepage, and that's, again, you can see the sharing activity there, and that's where we're getting to spinach. Okay, so we learned that social media is fundamental to what we are doing and how we're telling stories. But doing something fun and super shareable like the Oscars is one thing. Doing something spinachy like elections, that's a whole nother matter. So what have we done since? We're trying. Here's a piece we did. This was the food issue of the magazine. And, you know, people have very serious questions about food. And so instead of just having Michael Pollan, who's one of the magazine, one of the writers here, just sort of think of questions that readers might want to ask, we had the brilliant idea of saying, hey, why don't we actually ask the readers what questions they might have? And so that's what we did. We asked readers for questions, and he answered them. Okay? Pretty simple. Thanksgiving. We used to do this as a blog post on the Diners Journal. Every year, we would just kind of say, here are some Thanksgiving things you might want to keep in mind, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And we might kind of respond to questions that are posed in the comments section, but they were definitely secondary to everything else. So we just blew that up completely this year and said, well, let's start with this idea of reader questions. Now what you can't see on the right is a prompt that says, send your questions here. You type it in, tell us who you are. And then we actually ask readers to vote questions up or down, kind of chorus style. And the ones that got the most votes got answered. That's how we did it. So we got some great questions, to be honest. We got some of my favorites. I mean, really, you can't, really seriously, you cannot make this stuff up. Oh. And my absolute favorite, without a doubt. Right? The answer, by the way, is no. Is no. So not only did this app work, we saved lives. We saved lives. Okay? Very serious business. Very serious business. This is how we decided to do community on Schoolbook. Schoolbook education, one of the things that parents have are questions, and lots of them. And so rather than us trying to predict what parents want to know, we made it possible for parents to actually have questions become a first-class piece of content on the site. And what do I mean by that? A question here, now this happens to be one that we started, but any reader of the site could start a question. And that question can take the form, as you see there, like just an open-ended, hey, is your school overcrowded? And responses are voted up, voted down, and with occasionally editors will pick a top response if it's the kind of thing that can be answered, right? So then a question-answer pair like this will actually flow through our news feed, just as if it was something that we wrote, even though it was entirely written by readers, right? That's what I mean by first-class content. That is how you make a site inherently social, right? When readers are actually driving actually valuable content. Our dashboards. For every Republican debate, and there have been, what, 7,300 to this point, we have been doing these dashboards, which are kind of like live blogs, but a little bit enhanced. So, you know, they make it a little bit easier to kind of find key moments and things like that. They're bringing together different streams of content, including social media tweets, things like that. But that's not really what's the most, in my opinion, interesting thing about what we're doing. The biggest change is this part on the right, the Ask the Times piece. And what we wanted to do this year was say, you know, let's not just fact check things after the fact. And let's not just try to read people's minds about the things that we need to fact check. Let's ask people, what is making sense to you? What are you missing? What are we missing? What questions do you have? So again, you can't see this because this is in the turned off state. But we're soliciting questions in two ways. And this is in the context of a 2-hour debate. You can either put in a question in a little box and we'll just fill it out, ask your question, there it goes. Or you can send it by Twitter at #AskNYT. And they come into this little queue here on the right, and you can vote those up. And there's no guarantee that we'll answer it, but we generally get to between 5 and 8 of those a night. And we will have a reporter. Do I have an example of that? I don't think I do. We'll have reporters actually assigned to look at those questions and field them. And then it's really cool, because then the reporter will write an answer to the question, and it'll appear in the regular news feed, right? So Joe Schmo from Flint, Michigan asked, blah, 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 blah. And then Kit Seal will write an answer to that, or somebody, Michael Cooper or someone else will write an answer to that, right? To me, that makes this kind of an experience far more two-way. It makes it inherently social. And it takes something that is very spinachy and makes it more engaging, in my opinion. Okay, there was a fairly major sporting event recently in New York City. I am, as we were talking about earlier, a Viking fan, so I couldn't. If both teams could have lost, that would have been my ideal outcome here. Full disclosure. But we did, again, another dashboard. Had many of the same characteristics, but the thing that, and we did way more on our homepage, on our Facebook page. I mean, this is ridiculous. There are 2,100 comments on Madonna's, well, you know what I'm talking about. But we use this other tool here called Livefire. This is a company that does kind of comments and live discussion. And we popped this module on there to see how it would work. And what you can see barely down here is chat about this. You see that? I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm doing it. Right there. It says chat about this. What that does is it adds an anchor into the Livefire stream. And it gives you a way of referencing things in the material, right? So it's not just a chat that's kind of like flying by. It actually has a point of reference. So when you click on it, boom, then the news stream will go boom right up to where it's being referenced. Okay, so you know what they're talking about. People really used it. It was really good. So the chat was actually quite good, but the fact that we were able to reference the content at the same time was even better. So again, trying to take something that's inherently kind of a one-way thing and make it a little more two-way, that's the goal. We also did games within the game. So here, this was Andrew Debogall's team, the multimedia team, came up with this idea of ranking ads. You could rank it from everything from funny to weak in various categories. And if you clicked on it, you'd see pretty much, how many people thought it was whatever. And then there was a roll-up page you could go to after the fact. We did, I actually really liked this idea. This was one of the sports guys came up with this idea. It was predicting ahead of the game key moments, like how long Kelly Clarkson's rendition of the national anthem would be. I was convinced it would be about 5.5 minutes, but she did it quick. I was very impressed. Heads or tails, who's gonna win, what's the first ad after kickoff, beer, automobiles, snack food, stuff like that. It was funny, it was goofy, there were no awards. What color hoodie did Bill Belichick wear, stuff like that. It was good. But the point is we kind of get to a point, in my opinion, where these are the kinds of words that we're using to describe what's going on nytimes.com, even if it's a serious subject, even if it's something that's very spinachy. That's what we got to get to. And God forbid, something should be fun once in a while, right? Okay, so that's a lot of retrospective. Let's look forward. This is my white whale. This is one of these features that we do every single election cycle, presidential election cycle, and I hate it. I hate it. It's an issue grid, You see these in various forms, but they're all pretty much the same. Candidate, 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 issue, 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 position, 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 positions. I'm already asleep. Snore. Right? Who is going to read this? Who is going to engage in this? This is not interesting, right? Right? This is not interesting. Why not? Why not?
It doesn't involve people.
Oh, no, I agree with you. But why not that? Why not that approach, right? Why not take something like this Turkey helpline and make it into an election helpline, right? Why not kind of crowdsource this a little bit? Why not bring the readers into the actual creation of this a little bit? Why not say to them, okay, rather than us predicting how you want to know about issues, why don't you tell us how you want to know about issues? And we're already sort of doing it, as it turns out. We're doing it in the context of those Q&As on the elections. A lot of those end up being kind of issue focused. This is the way I would like to do it for the general election. I am hopeful we will get there. If not, you'll see something like this, and you'll know I will have failed. Maybe I'll do that, right? Maybe there'll be some key command, some kind of little Easter egg buried in there somewhere where you do the right key command and you get the spinach over the top. But this is what I'm talking about, right? This is where we have to get. We have to get to something that is more engaging, more sticky, more interesting, more driven, more two-way than the way we're doing things. And really what it comes down to, in my opinion, is when I talk about social first, I'm not talking just about social media. I'm really just talking about readers, right? Readers first. Think about the way readers want to engage with your content online in the context of news. And it seems like, wow, that's so obvious and so silly, but why do we not pay attention to this? Why do we continue to shovel basically newspaper formatted articles onto our website and wonder why people aren't reading all the way to the end, or why they're not engaging with us, or why they don't care, right? It boggles the mind why we are not changing the way we do things. So that's my spiel. And I will be glad to take questions. See, I told you we'd be done way before 8.
That's good.
I like keeping it tight. Questions?
So with all of this social media, interactive media, when does your job end? And because it seems like, I saw a comment from reporter at 10:41 p.m. So.
Well, I'm blessed to have a very large team. Okay, so I have 14 people on the tech side, and depending on how you count it, another 12 to 14 on the social media. How do you know you have a large team? When you lose count of how many are there? And another, say, 12 or so on the community side. Only a handful of those are full-time. So it's actually 5 on the community side, right? And 3 deputies. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but truly, a lot of these projects don't span weeks or months. A lot of them are in the moment, right? Like the election dashboard. That'll go for the period of time of a debate. But we're also trying to figure out things like breaking news. How do we treat breaking? Okay, think about breaking news for a minute. When news breaks, how do we do it on nytimes.com, right? People know. What do you see first? Now we get to see if anybody here is an actual New York Times, nytimes.com.
Well, I get a notification on my iPad.
You get a notification on your iPad, that's right. Wow. On the website, you'll see like a news bulletin, right? You'll see the little red strip across the top with no link. It will link nowhere. And that will go out to Twitter with no link. That will take you nowhere. It'll just tell you that this happened. Like craziness, right?
There's no link in the app either.
I know. It's nuts. Okay? Then the next thing we do, then what do we do? Right? What do we do then? Maybe we'll write like a quick write through. We'll take something from the Wire, or else maybe the lead blog will take a piece, and we'll pop that into the news section, the news story, like one of the top parts of the website, right in the center well. And then we'll write that through multiple times. Then maybe a reporter will eventually write a story, and that'll take the place of the blog, the lead blog, right? That's what we'll call a lead all. That's what we do. It's a lead all. That's what that story's called. We'll just keep rewriting it, right? Okay, that's a breaking news story. Tsunami hits Japan. Okay, what about next day? Then what? Then you have a whole nother story. Then the next day. And on and on and on and on. What do you do with stories that don't fit that sort of newspaper, next day paper paradigm? What do you do? BP oil spill does not fit the next day newspaper paradigm. It just doesn't. Arab Spring does not fit the next day's paper paradigm online. It just doesn't. These are stories where there is a long arc and periodic spikes of breaking news. How do you handle that? Where do you push people? During BP, we pushed them sometimes to a graphic that showed the spill, the size of the spill that day, but it linked to virtually none of the content, the actual stories. Other times, we'll push people to the lead-all, but the lead-all is just that day's story, and it assumes you know all the stuff that led up to it. Huge problem during the Arab Spring. Seriously. I am a voracious reader of this stuff, and I had a hard time keeping track of what was going on. Do you know who solved that problem, at least in my head, or at least started to? Mother Jones. Mother Jones started doing what they started calling explainers. And they were like these things, and all they were was in a question and answer format, similar to the Thanksgiving helpline. They were kind of a question and answer format, and they were basically titled, "What is the latest in Egypt? What's going on in Libya?" Right? And that's all it was. And they would keep updating these, but that was where they kept sending you, right? And it would link off to things, and periodically there would be stories that would push them off, but that was fundamentally the hub for breaking news. That's a good idea. So we need to deal with these kinds of questions.
And I think I saw that it looks like you can deal with these with email alerts. I found a story today, and at the bottom it says, get free email alerts on these topics.
You can get email alerts. Yes. Yeah. But again, where is that gonna, you'd probably get it hours later, maybe. I mean, they don't come super fast. Email is a really bad way to get breaking news. It really is.
Right.
It just takes time to get to you. It does. Other questions?
Oh, let's see. Okay, when you're dealing with an interactive
Is it
project,
just me?
yeah,
Is it really hot in here?
it's a little hot.
All right.
Oh, you're dealing with an interactive project, and you say you're going to do something close to a school book. Or how do you receive your project? Does someone come to you and say, "Hey, fix this," or "Hey, create this"?
Sometimes it's create this and then fix this. Usually in that order. But Schoolbook was an interesting project that I think we talked a little bit about earlier. Schoolbook came to us because man, I wouldn't bother. There's nothing more exciting than watching a speaker Google for things. Just trust me on this. What we used to do every year for test scores is we used to dump them into an interactive, and it would show, compare year over year, here's a school, look up your school, here's what they scored this year, here's what they scored last year, here's how they rank, right? Simple, straightforward stuff. Education Pod came to us and said, hey, we want to zazz this up. We want to do more with it. And we said, why? Why? All this is like the biggest cul-de-sac of interactives there is, because it would flatline for the entire year until test scores came out, and then boop, and then flatline for another year, and then boop, like that. Why would we do that? So we said to them, if you want to do something really interesting, let's talk about how we can actually take this data, of which we are using perhaps 10%, that is available both from the school district and from the state about education. How we can take this data. We can create a site that is useful to parents, that seamlessly integrates data and journalism as well as community together in one place. We can reimagine how to do education reporting in the city of New York. And they were like, okay, let's do that then. So that's how Schoolbook got started, right? So that's how that is one way. Other times we take projects to desks. Guantanamo, that was one. That came to us kind of like back channel, and then we took to the investigations pod. Often projects that we just have to do. Elections, Olympics, things like that. They're just gonna happen. Other projects come to us from desks. Reporters have ideas. Sometimes they're even good ones, and we'll do them. And that's really how it works. It's just like a news desk. I mean, I run a news desk. That's what it is. It just happens to be full of programmers.
Have you ever said no to someone?
Oh, all the time. That's my job. That's my entire job, is to say no to things. That's really what it kind of boils down to. I'm glad we're getting this on tape. It makes such great web video. No, that is a huge part of it, is that, yeah, we are not a service desk, right? That's the key difference. We're not, this is why having reporters in the newsroom who are actually journalists, right? I became a journalist the day I started writing news stories. This isn't the UK where you have to go and get certified or anything like that. I just started writing news stories. I went out, I responded to an ad for my college paper that said we need people to help cover Junior Olympics. They gave me an assignment. I went out and wrote about equestrian dressage. Who knows what equestrian dressage is? Really? Seriously? Amazing. Awesome. I didn't. Horses, yeah. It's that thing where they do little, like, very stylized. Yeah. You've seen it. You just don't know you've seen it. You don't know you've seen it. I'm sitting there, I'm terrified. It's one horse after the other looking exactly the same. And I have no idea what I'm looking at. And this woman sitting next to me is covering this for, I don't know, Dressage magazine or something. And, and at one point, a horse is coming by, and I have to be honest, I'm getting a little bored. And I'm watching, and she just gasps. Ugh, and I'm like, what? And nothing. The horse was just kind of walking. And that's it. I was like, okay, I need to talk to her. She clearly knows what's going on. That's how I became a journalist, right? You just start figuring things out. You start writing news stories. So suddenly you start inviting programmers into the newsroom, right? Folks come to my team. They're not just anyone, right, out of an IT shop. These are people I hire specifically because they have journalistic instincts or sensibilities. In some cases, they do have journalism backgrounds. Derek Willis, who works for me down in Washington, he and I have we've known each other forever. He and I basically have the same background. He's just a little better programmer than I am. I'm a nicer guy than he is. That's true, actually. And if he ever sees this, he'll be the first to admit, yeah, he's right. Yeah, he would agree with me. So that, I mean, but that's the key, is that you need to approach this like a journalist. You can't approach this like an IT shop. We're not there to just sort of say, slice off a pound of web, in the order received. That's not how we do things. It's not how we do things. Yeah.
To create the databases, do you transfer the information over to your spreadsheets that you create, or how does the process usually start?
You mean for gathering data?
Yeah, for gathering data.
Well, it can happen in a bunch of different ways. So in many cases, our interactives are driven off of user data. So that could come to us from the web. It's something we either write like a script to scrape it, or in some cases we'll go out and we'll download a database and we'll import it and then we'll push it out that way. So like on an election night, the Associated Press will publish, I bet people don't know this. How many people in this room, honestly, know where the campaign election results come from on election night and how they're gathered? How many people know what our source is? How many people think this is an official government source where our election results come from? How many people don't care? All right, fine. Sit quietly. I tell this to people in Europe and they just cannot believe it. This is actually done. This is the Associated Press that does this. Associated Press, there is no single official government source for timely election results. There is none. It's done by the Associated Press. They put people, thousands of them, into the field on an election night, and they sit there and plunk election results into a database or find some way of electronically getting it in, and that's how the national media gets the election results that you see on CNN, NBC, New York Times, everywhere else. Terrifying, right? Right? That is scary. But on those election nights, the Associated Press has this incredible infrastructure, and they will go and they will pump this into a database. We will then ingest, that's a great computer word, ingest the data, parse it, and then spit it out into a format that our graphics team can use, our print paper can use, goes straight to the website, and that's how you see the data. So it can come any number of different ways. That didn't exist until, so that's one of the big things, like that infrastructure didn't exist until my team. This is not 50 years ago. It was like 2002 when the New York Times was actually, and this is honestly got true, publishing results of campaign of elections by hand to the website, typing numbers in, looking at the AP wire, and updating things by hand on the website. That's not that long ago. Maybe in your world it is, but in mine, that is really not that long ago. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a friend who runs an online newspaper locally here in San Marcos, and he says his site has been a victim of denial of service attacks. He thinks it might be from competitors.
Yeah.
Does the New York Times have problems of its own with denial of service attacks, and how does
Yeah,
it deal
we have had that happen. I don't think, I would not be the right person to ask about it. We control our own servers, basically. Everything I showed you runs off of our own stuff. I mean, when we started this team, we went to the IT department and said, hey, we want to be friends. They said, we don't think you should exist. We said, okay, we'll be on our way. We'll just take it from here. It was a rather rocky start. Things have gotten much better. And we run our own servers, stuff like that. We've never had a serious problem with that. We've had some problems with web crawlers, like Google bots, things like that. We've had some problems with overzealous Googlebot type scripts, but we've never had a denial of service. And you control it the best you can. I mean, sometimes you can filter by IP, sometimes you can figure out who's responsible, sometimes you can go right to the, but if you really want to take a site down, you can take it down. You're not going to stop. If people out there really want to take you down, they will take you down. It is virtually impossible to avoid that. was another question. Yeah.
What would you say is the most challenging aspect of your job?
Wow. God, that seems like such a softball question that I should be able to answer off the top of my head, doesn't it? And that's a hard one. Wow. Give me a minute. I'm gonna pass on that. I'm gonna take another question. I'm coming back to you. Yeah.
Okay, as Cindy mentioned, our advanced media class is going to start covering how Texas State is a Hispanic Serving Institute. Do you have any tips on how to make that kind of information engaging and interesting to a diverse audience?
Yeah, I mean, start with the audience, right? What's interesting and engaging to the audience? It's really not. It's funny how it seems so obvious, but we don't ever think about it. It's like, start with your audience and work backwards. We're always trying to predict what people want to know, and that's kind of what journalists do. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Instinctually, that's what our job is to be the public's eyes and ears, to be the watchdog, to say, hey, that's something funny there. There's something there that needs to be told. That's kind of what we do. So maybe that's why it's hard for us to kind of take a step back and think a little differently, but that's exactly what I'm talking about here, right? Start with the audience and work backwards. Now, I don't know enough about the subject to give you anything more of a real superficial answer like that one, but it is really a different mindset. If you start with that as your starting point, I guarantee you will get to a better place in the end. I won't guarantee. I'll give you a 97.3% chance you will end up in a better place. God, the most challenging part. What is the most challenging part of my job?
I guess you have a good job.
I have a great job. I mean, how many times do you get to how many times do you get to go to people who sit in glass offices and say, we ought to do this, and have them turn around and say, okay, how many people do you need? Right? Which is exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. It doesn't happen often, where you get to pretty much write your own job description. Clearly, I am enjoying myself. I mean, there's like little ground level annoyances that happen. I don't even mind going to meetings all that much. I'll tell you, and I go to a lot of them. I'll show you my calendar. I'll make it queasy, but I don't know. I can't even give you a good answer. I really love my job. Sorry, I don't know for a good answer for that. I should. Maybe by the end of this I will. Other questions? Yeah.
You created your own job, didn't you? That's why you love it.
Yeah.
My question is about people journalism. Today I feel more and more people who are untrained in journalism are actually participating by providing information and photographs and various things to media organizations. I want to know how seriously this is taken and how much we should believe what we see.
I mean, I think you should believe it like any reporter would believe it, right? You source it. You check it for validity. We don't know. So UGC, user-generated content. Sorry, that was cool talk. That was cool talk for user-generated content. We have a pretty strict policy, and it's, some people think it's a little old school, some people don't. I happen to think it's the right one. We moderate everything. So when we solicit user photos, for example, they go through a moderation process. A photo editor will look at it. We have had a couple of cases where we've done photo projects like around the Grateful Dead. When they just went on I'm not a big Grateful Dead fan. Okay, I'm not a Grateful Dead fan. They just had like a tour recently. Is there a Grateful Dead fan in the room? No? Good. They had a reunion tour or something recently, and we asked users to send us their favorite photos, and we got a lot of photos that were, let's say from magazines and things like that. So, I mean, we've had issues like that. We haven't really had a problem with somebody trying to fabricate things, but we source it. I mean, we source it just like everything else. So, I mean, it's just like I don't see this as any different than any other, that it's talking to an eyewitness or a member of the public. I really don't see it as that different. Where it becomes Where I think it makes journalists a little afraid is when they see things, is when they see news breaking on Twitter, and they see things happening on Twitter that they kind of wish, maybe I wish I'd have seen that photo on NY Times first. And I don't know what the response is to that. I really don't. I don't know if there is one or needs to be one. Maybe our role is to step back and be the, we're no longer the, what's the cliche, the first draft. Maybe we're the second draft now. Maybe Twitter's the first draft. I don't know that we need to be that. I feel like I totally understand where the question is coming from, because I think a lot of journalists feel concerned, worried, like somehow our place in the world is going to be displaced by social media. And I don't have that particular worry as much, just because I do think there will always be an appetite for context and reporting, and that's what we do well. And if we continue to do our jobs well, and we do it in a way that's engaging, interesting, sticky, and God forbid fun, once in a while, people will come. People will still want it. At least that's my belief. I may be totally wrong and out of a job in 10 years. I don't know. But that's my belief. Let's go. Yeah.
You mentioned Facebook is the third largest driver of traffic to the website. How do you and your team build out the new timeline format for pages?
We love it. We just launched it. We just launched the new. In fact, they helped us out with this because this is so adorable. We just launched our timeline.
Where are you in that picture?
I am not in that picture. I'm not in that picture. And it goes back and we found this was a lot of work. Our marketing people and my team worked on this. Liz and Lexi worked on this, and this goes back to 1851.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Well, but here's the funny thing: when they brought us in and wanted us to do this, is like when this launched, they brought us in as like beta people early because they wanted us to launch with this. I think the timeline went back to like 1920, or maybe it was like 1950, or something really adorable. Like all these 12-year-olds that are working at Facebook who couldn't contemplate anything of import, before 1966. My God. So we had to ask them to actually extend it to go back to 1851, which they did, thankfully. But that was like something they had never contemplated. Is a timeline that would even go back that far.
Yeah. Because now you can add things prior to when Facebook existed.
Clearly.
Yeah, clearly. Yes, very much so. But I mean, they went through. There's some really cool stuff in here. I mean, they worked really hard on this. Gary Carter died, so they pulled some photos. But if you go back, you can't see on the side here. There's an actual timeline.
Can you go to a date?
You know what? I don't think you
Where's
can.
the date?
You just have to go.
Yeah, other than that little side thing that takes you.
Yeah, let me try to find
Was there something on the top
thing.
You might have to log in.
Oh, do I have to log in?
You might have to log in.
Okay. I'm not gonna log in. It goes back to 1851. Check it out. It's really cool. There's some great stuff in there, like old front pages and some great old photos and things. So we think it's great.
Is that scraped or selectively?
Selected. No, this was edited. This was edited and curated.
These giving speeches like this part of what you do, or you just break off once in a while to do this?
I love doing this. Coincidentally, this is how I get my flight and hotel for 2 nights paid for. Save the New York Times a little money sending me down to South by Southwest.
Oh, then you just
No,
get
I'm joking. I truly do. I do this sort of thing a lot because I do a lot of training too. And I'm part of an organization called NICAR, National Institute for Computer System Reporting, Investigative Reporters and Editors. It's one group and it has a lot of acronyms, but it's a great organization. It's like the only organization of its kind that's, by and for. It was created by and is made for investigative reporting. And don't get freaked out by that. It's mostly skills sharing. It's a group of journalists who believe fundamentally that we can help each other learn. So the NICAR conference, which is the nerdy conference, has become one of maybe 2 of the conferences where people who do what I do pretty much have to go every year. And we are learning from one another, learning together. And so I would not be doing what I'm doing, needless to say, without that. So I believe strongly in doing this kind of stuff.
How do you spell that?
IRE.org.
Oh.
There you go. And NICAR is the national. Is you'll see it. It's still linked there. Wait, sorry, there was a question back here. You had a question.
I wanted to find out, you said you were a political reporter for many years. So social media has been driving major changes in like the debates and what's asked on the campaign trail and stuff. And I wanted to ask you how you see that changing the whole political process. Are there positives? Are there negatives?
I'm probably not the right person to ask about that because I'm not, day to day on the election trail. But it is really clear that the campaigns are focusing very, very, very much on social media. So Ashley Parker, who is with the Romney campaign, was recently talking about her experience with the Romney campaign and how they will, anything that you write on Twitter that can possibly be taken, they will jump on it. If they see it, they are monitoring this stuff constantly. And they are using it effectively. This is the first campaign where I think, this is the first election where I think you're going to see a substantial investment in Facebook advertising, highly targeted, largely invisible Facebook advertising. Social media, I think, is going to be a huge, huge ad segment of ad buys for the first time ever. Certainly the first time since I can remember. But
one of the things I was curious about is, there in past years, journalists have played a very important kind of gatekeeper function and still do. And the kinds of questions that get asked at the debates have always in the past been controlled by the moderators.
Right. And
so I just wondered if you had noticed trends, if there were data trends that you were seeing.
I don't know.
And
I personally, having covered enough of those debates, not presidential, but like gubernatorial debates and things like that, they're all the same. The questions are, you can see them all coming from a mile away. They're not debates. I mean, the one thing about social media that I will say that is kind of refreshing is it's pretty democratizing in some ways, is that the campaigns can't ignore it. And memes can come from anywhere. And this stuff can really be either helpful or damaging. So campaigns are really got to pay attention to this. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm sure that if Ashley were here, she would have a much more intelligent answer than I do. But it definitely has changed things a lot, for sure. Yes.
So you showed us the.
Are you a Yankees fan by any chance? A little bit. Yeah.
You showed us the Thanksgiving stuff and what you want to do with the election coverage. Do you think that kind of really social approach, is that like a universal thing you can do, or are there some kinds of stories that you don't think you can?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't think that was the point that I was trying to make right at the end there, is that as you start thinking about social media, right, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you start thinking about how to make your projects more seamless and organic, right? That was the Oscars. It was totally organic. It was built, and we were building on top of the Facebook platform to make social part of the whole experience. It wasn't like we were just like a cupcake where we're just layering frosting on top of it, right? That's the key difference. I think you can do that everywhere, right? And I think there is, and I don't think when you start focusing on social media, a funny thing happens because you just start focusing on readers generally, right? You start thinking of things differently because you start thinking in terms of, well, wait a minute, what are readers going to want to know? What are they, and gosh, can't we find out, right? You're taking that step, you're not trying to read minds as much anymore. So yeah, I don't think that, I would not, let's put it this way, I haven't yet seen anything that couldn't be enhanced in some meaningful way by taking that sort of reader-centric, social-centric approach. Yes?
I was just curious, we want to know what the readers are thinking and so forth. you in particular when you're writing news. Do you, by any chance, if people invite you, strangers invite you to be their Facebook fans, do you sort of get into some of these Facebooks just to see what people are talking about?
Do I
Do
personally?
you or your staff?
I don't know if my staff does. I know that as a tool for, like, if you're a beat reporter, you're definitely, in Washington, it's been interesting. Dick Stevenson, who's our political editor, 2 campaign cycles ago, was ambivalent, to be kind, about the web, just generally. That has changed 180 degrees. The guy is on Twitter. The guy could not be more, I mean, the reason we're doing the Q&A now in the context of these debates, the Ask the NY Times, is because of Dick. Dick has had this complete epiphany about the value of social media and the web, kind of generally. And the reason is you can't do your job in Washington anymore if you're not following the right people. Because stuff breaks on Twitter. People say things on Twitter, people say things on Facebook before it appears on the wires in many cases. So you're following people. So yeah, I'm sure if you're a beat reporter, and I'm sure that's what you're doing. I personally am not. I use Facebook less than I probably should, actually, to be honest. And I sort of treat my own personal Twitter account as more of my own sort of personal thing, and which people discover very quickly when I'll get a rash of follows from a bunch of PR people, and then they'll see what I'm actually tweeting about, and then a rash of unfollows, like very soon thereafter. Yeah, lots of things that you're not really going to be interested in.
So when our students apply for a job, do you think a likely question is how many people are you following on Twitter?
Well, that's a good question, because I am. Oh, that's good. It's a good segue. I may be hiring some people in the very near future. What do I look for? I would say that is not something that I am not concerned about. What I'm way more concerned about, if I'm hiring somebody for a social media position, I'm way more interested in how they think about social media, about the possibilities of social media. Strategically, how can it help the New York Times? I'm not looking to hire a social media superstar, meaning I don't need somebody who has a personal brand. If 20,000 people follow you, awesome, great. But I'm not hiring you because 20,000 people follow you. I'm hiring because you are really smart about ways we can use social media to enhance the impact of our journalism. That's what it's about. So that's less important to me. Now, they have to obviously have a fairly good familiarity with the platform to know what the potential is, but I'm not concerned if 20,000 people are following you, or 2,000 people, or 200, or 2. I really don't. It really doesn't bother me. That is not a criterion for me. Yes?
She asked you earlier what the hardest part of your job is. So
Yes.
What's the most interesting part? What's the part that you wake up in the morning and say, yes, I get to do this today?
I am one of those rare people who gets to manage and actually quite likes it. I actually really enjoy it. I have the privilege of having a team of people that I absolutely adore and who bust their homes without ever being asked to do so on a daily basis. So for me, it's just watching that team just do amazing stuff. Because now the team is so big. When we started, it was 3 people. It was me, 2 other people. And there was some kind of fun and startup-y about that, where it was just like us against the world. And Aron's writing computer code. That was great, man. Those were great days for that reason. I got to write a lot more computer code back then. Believe me, there's a significant chunk of my staff really happy that I'm writing a lot less computer code these days, because I am not a good computer code writer. I'm an okay computer code writer, but not as good as they are. But I really do have the privilege of working with people I really like, who surprise me in ways that I couldn't predict, which I guess is the very definition of being surprised. But it's great. I mean, it really is. I could not be luckier to do what I do. So, wait, hang on. There's somebody who hasn't asked a question. Okay.
I haven't asked.
Cindy, you haven't asked a question.
I've been very quiet today.
Yes.
So I've got two questions actually, so I get two now.
Okay, you get two.
I'll take them one at a time though.
Since you're paying my airfare, you get
all
two
the questions I want. So kind of going along with what you look for in a candidate, we've got journalism, advertising, and mass comm students. What particular skills should they be seeking out, either that we should be teaching them or they should be seeking out on their own in order to work in this data-driven social media world?
Well, okay, so it depends. I hire people who have ranges of skills. Okay, so on the social media side, like I said earlier, I'm looking for people who they can be rather junior, but think very strategically about social media, who can articulate ways to take a piece of journalism and amplify it via social media, and or use social media as a tool to kind of engage with readers, right? That's fundamentally it. So that's sort of one side of it. On the techier side, I'm looking for mostly people who have background in development of some kind first. Now my team happens to be pretty techy on that side. So you gotta be, even to be an intern, you gotta have some pretty serious coding chops, like right out of the gate, either HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or some kind of back-end technology, Ruby on Rails, PHP, Django, or have some experience with some kind of computing background. That pretty much gets you in the door. And then from there, I want somebody who can think journalistically about this stuff, who can think creatively about how you create these kinds of projects on the web and how you tell stories on the web in this kind of way. That's what I'm looking for.
And other organizations are doing data-driven and social media. Can you talk about some of the other sort of benchmark type organizations like the New York Times?
Yeah, well, there's tons. I mean, we've been wondering when this would happen, and it's happening right now. A lot of news organizations are getting the religion. Sorry, I got a cold, so I'm going to do the Agricola here, and I hope I don't shoot it out at you like I did earlier today. There's a lot of organizations that are hiring right now. NPR is hiring a boatload of people. WNYC is hiring a boatload of people. LA Times is hiring. We're hiring. I mean, you name it, it's happening. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a dramatic shift where in order to be on the digital part of a newspaper, being able to write, turn a phrase, write a headline, copy edit, that will be kind of assumed. The ability to use and manage a content management system will be assumed. That alone will not get you a job anymore as a producer. That sort of a position. I think there's going to be a requirement to have some strategic sensibility about social media. There's going to have to be, and then if you know how to code and you do markup, even better. I mean, honestly, I think that's the way things are headed. Or you go to the other kinds of visual and digital storytelling. Video, audio. You're just going to have to become a much more well-rounded journalist. The problem is, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of students coming out of J school with a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and they do nothing spectacularly well. They do a lot of things pretty well. And that will get you to a point. That will. That won't get you past that point. So if I can give you one piece of advice, and this would be it, have a broad spectrum of skills, know a little about a lot of things, but be excellent in at least one of those things. And I mean excellent. Dig in, focus, because that is what's going to get you to that next level. That's what Andrew Devilgall is looking for on the multimedia team. He's hiring 2 people right now. Steve Duenas on the graphics desk is hiring 5.
Wow.
That's what he's looking for. I just got done hiring 5, and I may hire another 5, God willing, in the next year. So this is what I'm looking for.
That's good advice, because we do cover a lot of things that you just said in our curriculum, especially our graduate curriculum right now, but the students need to understand that maybe on their own they need to find that piece that they're going to focus on and make a huge portfolio statement with that.
Right.
And then just to add, The Guardian does some awesome things. and the Texas Tribune here in our own backyard to add to your list of the other great places. So if you want to look at other examples that other organizations are doing, it's really just starting to pick up, and everybody wants to do what you guys are doing, but not everybody's able to do it yet.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you, if you see the LA Times, election coverage this year, it has been, I would say in some cases, better than what we're doing.
What's the smallest news organization that's doing a great job?
Well, I mean, define small. What's the smallest team like mine doing it?
No, like a small paper, like the smallest
WNYC.
market. Yeah,
WNYC is
but that's
one
not
guy.
a small market.
Yeah, but it's a small. I mean, it's one guy. It's one guy. You know?
Yeah, right.
And he beat everybody in Iowa.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely picking up. Okay, you asked two. Hold on. Yes.
Okay. If you had to pick like one interactive that your team did that was your favorite, and what about the design and content makes it your favorite?
I would say Schoolbook, and it's not necessarily. It's more the content. It's more the application design, and I'll tell you why. And it's not so much the result, which I think is pretty good. I mean, I think it's pretty good. What was awesome about Schoolbook was what got us to the launch. It was the first time that we have worked on a project that was fundamentally going to be a digital project, beginning to end, where we had a room full. It was really cool to see. We had a room. The dev team was a room full of my people, developers, designers, editors, and reporters. Just like figuring out what Schoolbook ought to be. And that was really cool to see. So to me, that's why Schoolbook is a special place in my heart. Second probably is Gitmo, is a Guantanamo Bay thing. Just because that was the first project that we went back to the newsroom and pitched, and it got and to our shock and delight, the investigations team said, yeah, let's do it.
I was going to ask about Google Plus.
Yeah.
I got on it when it first came out, and then I haven't done anything on it. Is there?
You and about 40 million other
Yeah.
people.
Okay. So I was just wondering if it is a factor at all.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, what you're describing is what we're seeing.
Okay.
So, now, having said that, you're right. I don't think Google Plus has yet seen quite the uptake that maybe they make it seem that it seems to have, and it's just not quite there yet. And you can just see it in your own feed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very. I'm following like 200 and some people, and the first thing is from 8 hours ago, and the next thing is from yesterday. Yeah. And that's just that doesn't happen in my Facebook feed. It just doesn't. So now, having said all that, Google Plus has a really interesting strategy where Google is tying it so intimately into search results that I think down the road it could really be something. And I just don't know yet. I would not write it off. Mm-hmm. It is not just a Facebook work-alike, not even close, because it is now being intimately tied into search in ways that are really interesting. So now you're seeing, if you go to Google search, you see the results and you see the little tiny the little +1 heads, the little tiny thumbnails of people that have, that stuff works. People will click on links if they see that their friends have +1 them. That stuff works. And over time, the more signals they have to help, hone search results and customize them to you, the better off they think their search product gets. And Google Plus was a big piece of that in their strategy.
Are they going to run into problems with their whole privacy debacle?
They already have.
Yeah.
I mean, they already have.
Yeah.
It's on the other hand.
It's a little invasive.
Well, yeah, but I mean.
It's also social media.
Yeah, and how many times it's almost like you could do it as a one-act play. The apologies of Mark Zuckerberg, right? How many times has Facebook done something and then they've had to apologize, and they do it again, and then they have to apologize, and they do it again? I mean, it's everyone is running into that, right? Everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's tricky. Okay.
I have a few questions.
Oh, dear.
Which content management systems does the New York Times use, and which do you think are important to know?
We use one that we built ourselves called Scoop.
That's what I see.
Yeah. And I don't know that I have an opinion on which ones are important to know, because I think they're all pretty much the same. They all pretty much do the same things. We spend more time trying to hack the content management system than we actually spend trying to use it.
That's
to
what
be
I find
honest.
ideal in WordPress.
Yeah. Right. So we use WordPress too, but we build, like, the back end of Schoolbook is WordPress. The front end is all custom built. We're just taking the WordPress content and building it and building the outward facing piece ourselves. That's all it is. So.
What kind of content, since you're connected to Facebook, what kind of content can you gather from users?
Oh my God, so much. You've seen what I call the scary screen, where you do Facebook Connect, and it'll tell you all the things that you are giving this app the rights to do. We have access to your data, whether you're sleeping or whether you're awake, whether you're alive or whether you're dead. Your mother's maiden, it's like it just goes all the way down. Like all these things you can ask for. You can get all kinds of information about users. It's opt-in, but I don't think people pay as much attention to that as they probably should, because it is really amazing the kind of demographics you can get out of Facebook when people connect like that.
So that means you can potentially
This
check.
isn't being videotaped, is it?
Right.
Oh.
So you could get information on people's Facebook profiles that you would normally need to friend them to see?
It's a little different at the app level, but yeah, kind of.
I haven't gone deep enough into it to see what you can actually get out of it.
Yeah, go look at the developer site. See,
It's
pretty
changed
interesting.
so much.
Yeah, but I mean, it's opt-in, so presumably you know what you're doing. And I think there is I don't know, maybe this is a broad brush that a 46-year-old would paint, but I think there is a generation of people who just don't care as much about that kind of stuff. I just do think that's not as big an issue as it is. Like we did, when we relaunched comments, which we just did at the end of last year, we totally redesigned it. We added a new kind of, everything is moderated, right? I mentioned that. So all of our comments are moderated before they're published. It's a key thing in New York Times. We don't let you comment directly to the site. We did create a new kind of commenter we called them, initially they're trusted commenters, we just renamed it verified commenters, who are the people we know are really, really good and really trustworthy. And we said, okay, you know what? We're going to give you a badge. We're going to call you a trusted commenter. But we do want you to post under your real name. Now, how do we know your real name? And how do we figure this out at any kind of scale? So we decided we were going to tie in with Facebook. We're going to use Facebook Connect. We're going to log in once, grab their identity from Facebook, and that's going to be their identity on the site. For the most part, that's pretty good. Facebook is a pretty good proxy for real identity. The backlash to that was swift and significant. And I know because I asked to be on the receiving end of all of those cranky emails. We had 300 initial people invited in as trusted commenters. I heard from 100 of them, personally, saying, I will not use Facebook, I do not use Facebook, I am a subscriber, I don't see why I should be asked to connect to Facebook, I don't trust them, blah, blah, blah.
Ooh.
It's real. It's real. I don't know if we would have gotten that same response. Those people also happen to be, generally speaking, I would say, we don't know this for a fact, but just basically, I think they're probably closer to my age, let's say, than yours. If, let's say, our commenters that we'd invited in were closer to your age than mine, I don't think we would have gotten that kind of response. I just don't. I don't think that's as big a deal for people. I don't know. I mean, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, I don't know. But it is an issue. It's a big issue.
What kind of manpower does it take to moderate for the New York Times anyway?
We have a desk of 10 right now, and it's nowhere near enough. Okay, I'm gonna faint momentarily, so maybe one more question, and then we're gonna all have to.
Is there one more, or we're gonna take mercy on him
Yeah.
and not let him pass out?
All right, thank
Well,
you.
let's thank Aron very much. And thank you all for coming. Stay tuned for the next one. We actually have one right after.